Georgia O'Connor here. Big up Julius. Ring IQ. Welcome to the relay.
Welcome to the relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. Very soon, unbeaten up-and-comer of Australia. The young daughter of kickboxing legend John Wayne Parr and Angie Parr, Jasmine Parr, otherwise known as Jazzy Parr, will be returning to action. Jazzy Parr, who sports a professional record of 2 wins, no losses, and no draws. No recorded knockouts, not yet, but she's a slugger.
19 years old from out of Gold Coast, Queensland, Australia.
Campaigning in the women's flyweight division, she's set to run it back with Nasilia Costello. She actually made her professional debut against Nasilia Costello in December of last year.
Fun little fight, an action fight.
And now she's set to be running it back with Nasilia as part of an Ace boxing show set to go down early next month on the 3rd. This will be Jasmine Parr's second fight this year, only her second fight. I expected that 2022 would have been a more productive year for an unbeaten up-and-comer like Jasmine Parr, who needs to bank more rounds, garner professional experience. But as it stands, this will be only her second fight this year, at year's end.
And it's been a year since she last shared the ring with Costello.
Rather, it will be the night of. The night of the fight, December 3rd. This is registered as a flyweight contest. Flyweight, that's where Marlen Esparza reigns as both WBA and WBC champion. That's where Mexico's own Arely Mucino very recently procured the IBF title, and that's where Gabriela Alaniz of Argentina reigns as WBO champion. It's a talent-rich weight class, a talent-rich division, though in truth, I don't think Jasmine Parr is anywhere near fighting for an alphabet title. At just 19 years old with only 2 professional bouts in her record, she's miles away from fighting for an alphabet title, coming from a Muay Thai kickboxing background, transitioning into boxing. Could be some time before she challenges for a belt. She might even end up moving up in weight because she's only 19 years old now. Her body is still growing, and perhaps by the time she's ready to challenge for an alphabet title, she might be up there at super flyweight or bantamweight.
She's very young and has many good years.
Many good years ahead of her, so long as she continues to integrate herself into the sport of boxing. The Australian talent pool.
It's been a wave, an influx of talented, up-and-coming Australian fighters. You're talking about fighters like Jazzy Parr, fighters like Taylor Robertson,
Sky Nicholson, Stevie Sparks, fighters like Tszyu, Nikita Tszyu,
Justice Hooney,
Jay Opataya. We've been seeing an influx of very talented, young, up-and-comers in the Australian boxing scene. It feels like the boxing market down there in the land down under is bigger now than perhaps it ever was in previous eras of boxing. There's a lot of good fighters coming out of Australia. Jasmine Parr is one among them, and as stated, she's going to be boxing Costello for the second time early next month. I'm not completely sure why they're doing a second fight, why they're doing a rematch. Jasmine Parr won the first one.
I'm not completely sure why there's going to be a second. In any event, that's what's set to go down early next month.
Just in keeping with the theme of all things Straya, Montana Love believes he was robbed of an opportunity to pull out the victory against Australian import Stevie Sparks, who ended up securing the W after Montana Love got himself disqualified because he was quite deliberately trying to toss him over the ropes.
No explaining that away.
The fight was just starting to break out, said Love to IFL TV. We wanted to turn it into a dogfight in the later rounds. We knew Steve was going to shoot his wad. He was going to gas out in the late rounds. We didn't have the opportunity. The referee definitely jumped the gun, made a quick judgment call, definitely wasn't happy with it. With his record officially sullied, Love is hopeful that he'll receive a reprieve of sorts in the form of an immediate rematch. In terms of where he expects their sequel to take place, Love believes that both men should return to the scene of the crime. We're gonna do a rematch right here in Cleveland, Ohio.
I'll tell you the truth, I don't actually want to see a rematch, and for Matchroom's sake,
There were a lot of rumors and rumblings ahead of this fight that took place in Cleveland, Ohio, Montana Love's neck of the woods, that the tickets weren't selling, that this was a losing effort for Matchroom.
I think Matchroom Matchroom saw a young, charismatic fighter in Montana Love after that Ivan Baranchik fight. They saw a young, charismatic fighter with a lot of personality, and he has that. He has the outside of the ring stuff, but it's the inside of the ring stuff.
That's what he's missing for me. I've seen him 2 times since the Baranchik fight, and needless to say, I haven't been impressed.
How the judges had him up on their scorecards, I can sum it up in 2 words. Home cooking.
Because from where I was sitting, he was cut, he was getting outfought, outsized, bullied, moved around the ring. He could not effectively manage the distance against a taller, longer, and stronger fighter who was quite aggressive. Montana Love didn't have the speed.
You know, he was circling away, backpedaling. It looked a lot like he was trying to work off the counter, but he just didn't have the sharpness to do it.
In any event, for some reason, the judges had him up on their scorecards. The fight ending the way that it did is why Steve Sparks got the W.
Because Montana Love quite deliberately got himself disqualified. He felt he was losing that fight and he wanted a way out. An act of frustration.
I'm just going to come right out and say it. Matchroom, for all their efforts, they can't turn Montana Love into a star because inside of the ring, he ain't got the ability. Now, Steve Sparks, domestically, in Australia, where Matchroom has since debuted.
The Australian boxing scene is a little bit different from the American one. The Australian boxing scene is a bit more insulated to where you don't have to be fighting for an alphabet title to participate in a good fight, a fight that people want to see.
You don't have to necessarily be a world champion to sell tickets if you're an Australian-based fighter, an Australian national.
So it would help.
Of course it would help, but it's not a requisite. It's not necessary.
The idea that Montana Love and Steve Sparks are going to run it back over there in Cleveland, Ohio, Matchroom would be frittering away dollars on a fight that likely wouldn't sell any better than the first one did.
I'm just being honest with you. I think Sparks versus Love sells better in Australia than it just did in America.
Yeah, I think they'd garner more interest for a sequel, for a rematch in the land down under than right here in North America. That's what I think. Moreover, I don't actually want to see a rematch. I'd rather see Stevie Sparks versus Liam Bottle.
I'll tell you what I think. Give me Montana Love versus Jock Brarvis as the co-main event to the main event, Liam Bottle versus Stevie Sparks. I could go for that. And then let the winner of Jock Brarvis versus Montana Love take on the winner of Sparks versus Bottle. That's what I think. That's what I'd like to see.
I think a show like that sells better in Australia than doing a rematch between Love and Sparks in America. I'm sorry to say, you're not going to turn Montana Love into a superstar.
Here and now, I don't know that Matchroom has any options on Stevie Sparks, although they might.
I don't know if they do, but if they do,
Sparks versus Bottle is a better fight.
it's more intriguing.
You get Dempsey McKean on the card. You get Sky Nicholson on the card.
Australian fighters.
Jock Brarvis is on the rebound. He needs to get back in the winner's bracket. You get him on the card. Maybe he's opposite the ring Montana Love.
They're both on the bounce. They're both on the rebound. It makes sense. Redemption.
I don't think Matchroom's endeavor into the Australian boxing scene is a one-and-done kind of deal, given how many Australian fighters they've signed. This could very well be Matchroom's next show in the land down under at some point next year. I don't want to see Love versus Sparks 2.
They'd just be wasting money doing that thing.
In men's heavyweight news, Anthony Joshua said distractions outside of the ring are making boxing complicated.
We've never known Anthony Joshua to have the tumultuous home life that, say, young Teofimo Lopez has, with all of his family issues.
But that doesn't mean that he doesn't have issues of his own. He very well might.
Probably.
I was supposed to be in the ring this year. I'm going to be in the ring next year. I'll be in the ring when I'm in the ring. I don't want to make any statements today and get held to the cross by it, Joshua said in an interview on DAZN during the broadcast of the card headlined by Dimitri Bivol and Gilberto Ramirez. So when I'm ready, I'll get back in the ring. You know what it is?
I think the last we heard is that he's supposed to be coming back in either March or April.
I ain't a champion, and it's just hurting a lot. I'm in the gym, rebuilding and restructuring everything I got to do inside and outside the ring. There's a lot that goes on outside the ring in my life, which makes my ring life complicated. So I just need to simplify a lot of the stuff outside of the ring and then just put my full attention in the ring. Really. Once I have that done, next year, I'll be ready.
I've maintained throughout that because Anthony Joshua isn't a champion anymore and he's not being bogged down by mandates and time constraints, he should utilize this time to do things on his own terms. Don't be in a hurry to get another alphabet title.
Let the world title picture sort itself out. While you rebound off those two back-to-back losses to Oleksandr Usyk, Anthony continued, "My life is complicated. Boxing has become a bit complicated for me. Everyone is just trying to make the most of this time while I'm boxing, and they are doing a good job. But it does affect my ring activity as well," said Joshua. "So I just always try to push all that stuff out the way. It's a challenge. I'm just trying to get out of the way.
Get it out of the way.
Get it out of the way this year so that next year I feel more focused."
To what outside the ring distractions Anthony's referring to? Your guess is as good as mine. Is he talking about family life, home life? Is he talking about the business of boxing, the politics of boxing?
For one reason or another, Anthony hasn't been all that active the last 3 years or so, since the pandemic started, really since 2020. He only fought once in 2020, only once in 2021, and only once this year. That is not conducive towards staying at the top of your game and staying sharp.
You could argue that the pandemic had a lot to do with why Anthony Joshua only fought once that year, 2020.
But that first fight with Oleksandr Usyk, and the second, seems like a lot of time went into both of those fights. Both of those fights and orchestrating those events was rather time-consuming, so much so that Anthony only fought once last year and once this year.
So maybe it's the business stuff he's talking about. Maybe it's the business stuff that's also been bogging his schedule of activity down. Maybe that's what he's referring to. Maybe it isn't.
But he needs to sort out his schedule. He needs to sort out his corner situation, which seems quite immaterial right now. We know that ahead of the Usyk fight, he enlisted the aid of veteran trainer Robert Garcia. And we all know how the fight went. For what it's worth, I think Anthony looked better in the second fight than he did in the first, but you don't get the sense that Robert is going to be in his corner for his next fight. And that's disappointing because you need structure. You need an established rapport.
You worked with Robert, now you're in the market for a new trainer. You're right back where you started then, aren't you?
It wasn't just Robert Garcia. Angel Fernandez was actually the head trainer.
I think Robert was there to help supplement the effort. The corner situation was a bit peculiar, a bit bizarre.
It was a bit strange, and I find myself wondering if Angel Fernandez moving forward will remain in Anthony Joshua's corner, or will he give his corner a complete overhaul, sack everybody, and start from scratch. But it's clear that there's more work needs doing.
That inference we can make.
I still think Anthony Joshua is one of the best heavyweights out there, one of the best heavyweights in the world, and he just needs to get out there and show that. He may be coming off of 2 consecutive losses to Oleksandr Usyk, but everybody ain't Oleksandr Usyk.
Opposite the ring, Zhilei Zhang. Opposite the ring, Otto Wallin or Filip Hrgovic. I like Anthony's chances.
Frank Warren's boy, Daniel Dubois. Even opposite the ring, Joe Joyce.
He stands a decent enough chance opposite the ring, those guys as well.
I think the most important thing, more important than getting an alphabet title back in his hands, back around his waist, is getting him back in the ring and getting him active.
He's got demons he needs to exercise, and that's the only way to get those demons out. Get him back in the winner's bracket.
And finally, in reference to yet another Australian fighter, Tszyu on facing Jermell Charlo. This is the Super Bowl, the grand final.
Tszyu is Jermell Charlo's mandatory challenger by way of the WBL, much to the chagrin of the IBF's mandatory challenger, Bakram Murtazaliev, who was IBF mandatory before Tszyu.
Before he officially became the WBO's mandatory challenger, but boxing.
What are you supposed to say?
The countdown to Undisputed has officially begun. Australian boxing superstar Tszyu will fight for the Undisputed Super Welterweight Championship of the world. Tszyu will face the undisputed champion at 154 pounds, 32-year-old Jermell Charlo, for all the belts.
January 28th, early next year, January 29th in Australia, due to the time difference. They're ahead of us by about 14 hours.
The fight will be live and exclusive Foxtel's Main Event and KO Sports, and is expected to be one of the most watched title fights of all time in Australia. That's the kind of celebrity and the kind of audience Tszyu commands domestically in the land down under.
Well into the pandemic, this kid was putting asses in the seats in Australia.
Tszyu spoke to the media alongside his uncle and trainer Igor Golubev, brother and rising prospect Nikita Tszyu, manager Glenn Jennings, and No Limit CEO George Rose. Tszyu said, "This is the Super Bowl, the grand final. This is the clutch.
The clutch shot at NBA Finals. This is equivalent to that."
The 28th of January, as many people know, is the day that Dad, Costello, beat Jake Rodriguez for his first world title in Las Vegas. It was the start of his career, and it's pretty crazy, like a deja vu type of feeling, that it's happening the second way around on the exact same date, in the exact same location, 28 years apart. It's pretty insane. It was a total domination. He completely annihilated Jake.
My birthday is on the 2nd of November, so it's coming up, and Mom asked, "What are you gonna do?" And I said, "I don't want to do nothing."
She was like, the funny thing is, when Dad was prepping for his first world title, he said the exact same thing. All in, no plan B, just all in. For me and Igor, we need to disappear, get into the jungle in Thailand, and go back to the basics, the old school training methods. That's what got us to this position, and just to isolate and be away from all distractions, be away from everything and focus on what's ahead, because what's ahead is going to be one hell of a ride.
If he pulls the upset, I'm pretty sure that Jermell Charlo is the betting favorite going into this thing.
I have a high opinion of the both of these fighters, both Jermell and Tim, but they are in very different places in their careers. Jermell Charlo is the consensus #1 junior middleweight in the world, and Tim, young Tim, for all his promise and ability,
He's just a contender.
Jermell Charlo is not a fighter, not a champion who stumbled into all of these alphabet titles he has since procured. He had to go through the gears to get every single one of those belts. He knows victory. He knows defeat. He's experienced.
There's not a lot that 154 pounds has that he hasn't already seen.
But at the same time, I've always liked the cut of Tim Tszyu's jib. I love this kid, love how he carries himself, and love what he's done for the domestic Australian boxing scene. If by some chance he could pull the upset, that would be monumental for them.
It's hard not to root for him.
It's not necessary, you understand. He didn't have to do this. He's got enough marquee value domestically that he could have kept fighting domestic-level guys and made good money to do it.
But he's ambitious. He wants it all.
Earlier this year, he was in action here in the US of A against Terrell Gausha, and, he beat that guy the way I thought he was going to beat that guy, but he suffered an injury to his hand, and he had the hand operated on back in May. That decommissioned him for approximately 2 months.
Yeah, I believe that's how long they said it would take him to recover from the surgery.
That effectively ruled out all of May and all of June and perhaps some of July. But you'll notice that there's still a lot of time left, or there was, in this year, and they weren't able to do this undisputed title fight.
It's a pity they couldn't do it sooner.
Tim Tszyu used to be a pretty active fighter before he started dealing with the PBC and got caught up in that nexus.
That Bermuda Triangle.
I like this kid, but I'm sorry to say, well, for that hand surgery and a sparse schedule of activity, already not being as experienced as Jermell,
Because he isn't.
what kind of odds can you really give him?
Yeah, but Jermell Charlo's not that active either,
Neither of them have been all that active this calendar year, but Jermell has experience on his side.
It's just reality.